Well, hello, everyone, and welcome. My name's Jennifer Truitt. I'm the Executive Director of Ziglar Family, and I'm so excited to be here today because I have got a super special interview that I'm about to do and then to share with you guys about a topic that I know if you're a parent is going to be super interesting. It's going to be near and dear to your heart, and it's going to make you think. So just to give you a little bit of background before I reveal our special guest, I, as some of you probably know, am in a position now where I have a 16-year-old and an 18-year-old, and the 18-year-old's about to graduate and make her way in the world. 16-year-old's not far behind. And so there is a lot of talk in our house about what am I going to do when I grow up? And because they are getting very close to that time where they have to start making decisions. So as a mom, a big concern for me lately has been, how do I help them to discover what it is they're meant to be doing with their life? You know, when I graduated from high school, it was, I want to be a teacher. I'm going to school to be a teacher. I graduated as a teacher. I taught for several years. And then I discovered I have passions that are also in other areas, which is how I'm here talking to you today. So what I wanted to do was to find someone who could really speak to this idea of us as parents helping our children to discover their purpose, their calling, their mission in life. And to that end, I have found a great expert to help us, Kevin Monroe. So Kevin, say hello.
Well, hello, Jennifer, and hello, Ziglar family friends. I am excited to be here with you today and looking forward to this conversation, Jennifer.
Absolutely. And let me just sort of introduce you a little bit officially and let our audience know that, you know, Kevin, he has a podcast that he does, the Higher Purpose podcast. So purpose is one of his, it is probably his platform and passion. I'm going to let him tell you more about that in just a second. He has been a leadership consultant and a speaker and an executive coach. So Kevin helps many people find their purpose, this topic that we're talking about today. So Kevin, that's sort of an overview of what you do, but why don't you just step in and tell our audience just more about yourself, your background, and how you came to this topic of finding your purpose.
Okay. Well, Jennifer, I want to say something else before we get started. I want to tell you why I'm excited about this and why Ziglar family is so special to me. As you said, I lead the Higher Purpose podcast. That's something I started last year. And as we were starting, I reached out to friends and asked, who do you know that would be a great guest for the podcast? And as it turns out, your friend and the head of Ziglar family, Mark Tim, ended up, this wasn't planned, but he ended up being the very first guest interview on the podcast. There was another guy that had supposed to be that interview, and he was sick. We missed the date. We're running short of production deadlines, and they're like, "Well, who can you get?" And all of a sudden, Mark just popped into my calendar, and Mark and I connected. And I told him, "Hey, you get to be the very first guest on the Higher Purpose podcast." Well, for some reason, that excited Mark, and we've just been big friends ever since. And I've just fallen in love with the work of Ziglar family. We've had opportunity to do other things together. So I'm excited to be here and share purpose today.
Well, awesome. And, you know, I didn't actually realize Mark was your first guest. I knew he was a guest, and I actually heard that podcast, but it didn't click that that was the first. So that's kind of exciting for us. And you, as it turns out, are not the first interview that Ziglar family has ever done, but you are our first interview with our new nonprofit launch of Ziglar family. So in a way, you're kind of a first for us too. And my first one all on my own to set up and bring to our audience. So kind of exciting too.
Yeah, this is exciting. So the one thing that I want to be careful and that we say up front here, Jennifer, and when you and I were talking about this and talking about what we might do and how this might unfold, I love Ziglar family and I love purpose. And I do have expertise around that, but I'm a peer. When I'm talking to you as parents, please understand, I'm not a licensed psychiatrist, psychologist, any of that stuff. I am a peer. I'm a parent. of 2 children that are now adult children, grandchildren, and we even have grand foster children in our family. And so purpose is really important to me. And I've been on this pilgrimage, this journey. I really look at it all my life. So when I'm talking today, the conversation we're having is as parent to parent, as peer to peer, as fellow traveler to fellow traveler. I'm not sitting here telling you, that I have the PhD and I've done the tons of research. I'm talking about living purpose in the trenches.
Well, then let's just jump right in and talk about that purpose. So tell us a little bit about how you define purpose and how you see that applying to the family situation and particularly to children. Start with
Yeah.
adults and then move through there. Sure.
Okay. Well, Jennifer, I believe, well, let's define purpose. Purpose, people define it different ways. I love the French word, raison d'être, reason for being. I mean, purpose really is the reason that you're placed on the planet, that I'm placed on the planet. Now, I'm a person of faith, and I believe purpose originates from God. There's a verse that Solomon, attributed to Solomon, that I love from Ecclesiastes that says, God set eternity in the hearts of men and women, God set, and children, and that God put eternity in our hearts. And the search for purpose, I believe, is our response to that eternity being set in our hearts and locked in our hearts. And so while there is this increase of popularity around purpose in our generation, it's not new. You look at it through history, and throughout history, we see people in the search for purpose, and Blaise Pascal talked about the God-shaped hole in the hearts of men, that's also that purpose. And so we've been in this quest for purpose, the quest to have meaning, significance in life. I believe all of that is part of purpose.
Well, then how would you say that as adults, we know if we're living in our purpose? Or is that too much?
Well,
what is that
okay.
like? What does it feel like? What does it look like? I mean, I think I'm living in my purpose. What are some
Okay, well, let's establish this as well. I believe purpose is kind of a big category. When I grew up, this is something my understanding changed over time. And I've done a lot of reflection on this in recent years. Jennifer, when I grew up, I had this belief that the will of God was like this pinhole prick in the whole universe. And unless I knew the exact geospatial coordinates, not just longitude and latitude, but however else you put it in space, that there was only this one tiny speck in the whole universe. And if I wasn't dead on with that speck, I had missed God's purpose for my life. Well, I'm glad that I finally got over that misguided notion, and purpose is big, it's broad. And I believe purpose manifests itself in different ways. And, Mark and I, one of the conversations we had, and I'm not sure if Mark said it first or where it came from, but I come to believe if you're a parent, you have a purpose. You may be wondering, well, what's my purpose? Well, if you're a parent, your children are part of your purpose. Bingo. Now, you may have other parts of purpose, but being a parent is one of the greatest purposes you and I are privileged to have and to fulfill.
I love that. And I totally agree with that. And I also believe that you at some point, and probably not in your parent purpose, but you do fulfill purposes and then you move on and have new ones and move toward fulfilling them too. Like you say, it's not that one calling, that one thing. Now, as a parent, I have been down this road. I've got a few trips around the sun under my belt. And with that age comes wisdom and the understanding that life is better when your purpose is aligned with God's will for you and that sort of thing. So as a mom, I'm always looking to make sure I'm trying to help my girls live in their purpose.
Yeah.
So I think there could be a little bit of a fine line there because, for example, my oldest daughter right now is thinking she wants to go to school and be a nurse and serve others in the capacity of being a nurse. I, her mom, see qualities in her that maybe I don't see as being a fit as that nurse, that person who takes care of other people. She doesn't like to clean up a pet mess. How is she going to clean up a human mess?
Yeah.
But the point is, I feel like we have to encourage them to follow
Yes.
what they believe is their purpose within reason, and not necessarily put our preconceived notions of what our children's purpose is in our mind on them. So do you have
Yeah.
any thoughts on that?
Oh, I do. I do, Jim. But before I do that, let me go back. I'm not sure if I fully answered the last question. And as you were talking, I thought, gosh, there was something else. How do
Okay.
we know when we're living in purpose? And there is a book, I wish I could say the author's name, Shimaneski or something, about flow. And
Okay.
I think one of the real characteristics that we know we're living in purpose is when we jump out of bed in the morning. Whether you're a morning person or not, you may not jump out, but when you awaken, there is a sense of anticipation. There's a sense of excitement. We know we're in our purpose when you're doing something and the sense of time, you lose it. You do something that gosh, it seemed like an hour and 3 or 4 hours have gone by. It's when you're operating in your zone of genius or your zone of gifting. And I go back, I believe, and there's a verse, I don't know, it comes from Peter. I don't have the exact reference, but God has given every person on the planet a gift. So we all are gifted to do something. And so being in purpose is also when we are living in and being able to use that gift that God has given us. So those are some things that really help us know when we're in purpose, when we're on purpose.
Good.
Now, to your question, wow, here's one of the challenges that I think we as parents have. And that's when we're looking at our children, we've got to be careful that we're not putting our fears or frustrations with purpose onto them. And not trying to live vicariously through our children. And some of you listening know what I'm talking about. Maybe it happened to you with your parents. The expectations or the frustrations. Let me give you an example. Our son, Josh, he's now 31, just turned 31 a month or so ago. But when Josh was in in high school and anticipating college, Josh was a musician and he wanted to pursue music. Now, I had several friends who were professional musicians, none of whom were successful at making a living as being a musician. So they were fabulous. I mean, they were world-class musicians. One of them played for Disney. One of them was a blues guitarist who had toured all over Europe. One of them is a world-class saxophonist. So, these were great musicians. But one of them was writing software code at the time. One of them was painting houses, and one of them was running an operations for a telecommunications company. But they were world-class musicians. So Josh was wanting to go to college and study music. And he had heard from me this conversation of, well, you need a backup plan, son. You maybe that you need another more practical degree. And Jen, when he was a junior in high school, he'd been studying Spanish. I was on a business trip in Puerto Rico, and he went with me. And I remember, I could still take you to the place today, almost the exact spot. Sunday morning, we were driving from San Juan to Ponce on the south side of the island, going down the main road there. And I remember because we were passing this mountain, there was a billboard up on the hill. And at that exact moment, I was just overwhelmed with this sense. And I looked at Josh and I said, son, if you want to go study music, then you need to study music. Don't let the the frustrations, the experiences of our friends that he knew well. Don't let that force you into, I need to go pursue a business degree. Music is my passion, but I want to go pursue business because I need a backup plan. And and it was just a breakthrough for him. And he's like, really? I'm like, yeah. And that's what he went and did.
And so how's that turned out? You need to tell us the rest of it.
Yeah. Well, the rest of the story, as Paul Harvey would say,
Yes.
now at 31, he's working in business. It's funny, Jen. He's working in business, but he and when he went to college, he knew he wanted to go to Georgia State University to the School of Music. And it was a highly competitive entrance. And even then, my wife, Gwen, and I, we would be talking. And I mean, I was just kind of like, you need a backup plan even on that. Isn't there another school? What other school would you like to apply to in the event that Georgia State doesn't accept you or the School of Music doesn't accept you? Dad, it's it. I'm just applying there. That's where I want to go. And he applied to Georgia State. He got admitted into the university, but was not yet into the School of Music. And there's some interesting things there. Full disclosure, or maybe more information than folks want to know, but I'm sure this would be beneficial to many of your families. We had homeschooled our children. So as a homeschooler, he had this incredible gift and talent to do music, but he did not have the experience of playing a lot of the instruments that he would have had if he'd have been in a school band or orchestra. And as part of the audition for admission, he had to play a bunch of instruments he had never had. Well, a friend of ours that was part of a big church, and they had the symphony, they had all of the instruments, made it where he could go in and practice and learn and get experience on the timpani drum and all of the kettle drum, all of these other things that he had not played. And he went, auditioned, and got in.
So that's great. And does you said he's working in business. So obviously he went for the music degree. He's working in business now. What role does music play? If it was his passion, and is it still a bit of a passion for him now, even if it's not how he's making a living?
It's very much a passion, Jen. And as a matter of, and so Josh, his primary instrument was drums, but he plays guitar, plays keyboard. So their basement room in their house, is just filled with musical instruments. 2 sets of drums, congas, guitars everywhere. And as a family, they do that. But it was really a commitment to family that led him to not choose that as his primary career now. Because so much of music is nights, weekends, all of that in the performance. And he just put it aside for a season to pursue business. But the interesting thing is, when I look at this, the discipline that it took to succeed in a music program, it prepared him to succeed in business. You didn't have to study business. I look at my degree, my undergraduate degree is in theology. And I worked in churches for a short time in my 20s, but for the past 30 years, I've not worked in churches. But what my dad helped me understand, people skills are transferable. If you have people skills, you can succeed in any business. You don't have to have the degree in a certain field. Now, granted, you don't want a brain surgeon operating on you, that only studied economics. So there are some fields where that training is really a requirement, but it's not a necessity in business or certain other fields.
Well, it sounds to me then, if we sort of bring this around to the whole story and wrap it up, is that you recognize that he felt this particular calling, that he felt this particular passion to follow, and you freed him up to do that. He did follow it and has led himself to where it is he's supposed to be right now, which I think as parents, that's what we would want for our children. We don't want to be the ones who are telling them where they have to be. We want them to be discovering it and to feel that they're living how they're meant to be living right now. And there may come a season again for your son, for example, where music comes back to being. Maybe he'll use it. Who knows where he'll use it or could use it, or maybe not. Yeah. As long as he feels, in my opinion, as long as he feels that he is walking the journey he's meant to be walking and he is aligned with his purpose for right now,
Hmm.
that's important. And that's what I would want for my girls too. So I know you have some ideas for parents who are listening who may not have a clue of how to help get their children walking down that right road, who may have to take a hard look at themselves and say, you know what? Maybe this dream I have of him playing professional baseball is my dream, since
Yeah.
I, got cut off the college team or whatever, you name it. Maybe I need to back off and let my child follow their inclinations. So I think the best message that we could give people right now is that here are some ways that you as a parent can be sure
Mm.
that you are aiding your child and giving them encouragement and helping them get to where they're meant to be without you dictating it, would be the word, I think. So I know you've got some steps. Maybe we
Yeah.
can just jump into those a little bit, and you can give us as parents some practical suggestions for how we start this journey, how we help them start this journey.
Absolutely. And there's one other thing, and this thought just hit me this week, Jen. Um, and it's interesting. I think for a lot of us, well, let me ask you,
Okay.
what's the shortest distance between 2 points?
A straight line.
That's what we all learned in school, right? The
Right.
shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. That's a principle of mathematics or geography, wherever you want to apply it. Earlier this week, it just hit me. In life, straight lines are overrated.
I agree.
In life, straight lines are overrated. And that's one of the things that we've got to be careful as parents, because I can tell you, as a parent, and I believe this is the true of all parents, we want to spare our children of unnecessary suffering. And we want to help our children not make the same mistakes we made.
Exactly
Uh,
right.
Now, children, we all have to make our own mistakes, but we want to spare them some of that. And so sometimes I think we're trying to see, okay, here's point A, here's point B. Let me help them get there fast by designating the straight line. And this whole idea in life, enjoy the journey. The zigs and the zags, some of those weaves we have, that's the richness of life. And that's what makes the journey so enjoyable. So don't be so obsessed with getting your child from point A to point B as fast as possible. Now, we want to spare them pain, but let them enjoy the journey. And I just think there's something there. So, don't blow through life so fast that you miss some of the fine and fun points of life.
That's excellent advice, because really, I mean, as a parent, when you're about to send your child to college, you want them to get from freshman year to senior year with that diploma as quickly as possible and in as straight a line as possible. But in reality, that's highly unusual from what I understand. A lot of times what they think of as a freshman is not where they end up as a senior. So, and that's just one, snapshot of life. But you're right. If we look back, if you look back, if I look back at our whole story, there's no way you could draw a straight line from where we started to where we are right now. And it's been interesting. It's been enjoyable.
Yeah. And some people that traveled the straight line, it wasn't their line. It was the line their parents prescribed for them. They're the third generation, whatever it is in the family business, whether that's physician or lawyer or business owner, and they just felt they didn't have a choice, that this is what was expected of me, and I'm doing this out of obligation. It's not out of a desire. Okay, so let's get into this. You talked about going to college. So the first thing I think of, Jen, is this whole idea of orientation. So let's start with orientation. And when do you remember an orientation? You watching this, think back to an orientation. Was it at school? I still remember freshman orientation. I remember some new hire orientations, the first day on the job, and you come in. When I joined a Fortune 100 company, Bell South, back in 1991, I came in, and there was a whole class of us, and we went through new hire training together, a whole week of it, and there was so much orientation. But when I think about my orientation as a parent, I have to admit, it was pretty weak. Right?
Yep, absolutely. There didn't come a guidebook with that baby. There didn't come none of that. No parenting orientation 101 before you go home with that baby. Absolutely not.
We did childbirth classes,
Mhm.
and we did all of that, but nobody prepared me for that first night home. And I remember being home. We lived in Birmingham, Alabama at the time. Joshua was our firstborn, and my wife had a really tough delivery, so she is in bed. She can't get up, and I'm up with Joshua, and I mean it's 2:30, 3:30, 4:30 in the morning. I'm like, oh my gosh, what have we gotten ourselves into? Right? So there was no guidebook. Um, that's the orientation, but I want us to set the stage when we think about this. How do we promote purpose with our parents and as parents? And I believe one thing to remember is our goal, our desire is to whet their appetite for a meaningful life. Let me say it like this, Jennifer. Our goal as parents is not to get them to the destination, but get them started on the path.
Orient them to the
Yeah.
proper path and then let
Yeah.
them start out on it.
So parents, I want to say to you, it is not your responsibility to get your children to their destination. I think some of us that's a bit much, but it is to get them on the path. And I remember being grateful, being part of a church that taught us that our goal was not to raise good kids. Our goal was to raise kids that would become wise adults, responsible adults, beginning with the end in mind. It's not just their behavior now, but it's instilling in them life skills for life. So getting them started on the path.
I
So
love
that's
it.
where it starts with orientation.
Okay. Makes
And
a lot of sense. And what's next?
yeah, observation. I believe as parents, we have this real opportunity. And as parents who are believers, if you're a believer, ask God for wisdom. But there's this opportunity to observe, become a student of your child, if you will, right? Think about your child, become a student. Watch what is their area of gifting or giftedness. A moment ago, I said, we're all gifted to do something. So what is it that your child just does so easily? What is it that just comes so naturally to them that they don't even think about it? They're doing it with ease. And that's something you're wired to do when it comes out like that. What gives your child joy and pleasure? What is it that even when your children are young, you're having to say, Johnny, Susie, Abraham, it's time for lunch. It's time for dinner. Stop what you're doing. Oh, another 5 minutes, Mom, just another 5 minutes. And they're just lost in it. Well, that could be something that they find great joy and delight in. So observe that.
I'd like to just take a slight rabbit trail off of that
Okay.
for a second, because I think it's important as a part of that to expose them to so many different things when they're young that they can find that. Because, for example, I pretty much let my daughters try everything they wanted to try. They couldn't do it all at once. I was that mom who was like, no, we're not doing 3 sports and music lessons. But they tried cheerleading, basketball, different instruments, Girl Scouts, all of these different things. I did not feel that as a parent, once they started it, I had to make sure they stayed in it and got extra coaching and became the next prodigy at whatever. I just wanted this broad range of exposure. Even when they were very young, when we lived in Atlanta, I would take them to shows at the Fox Theater to expose them to theater, which ended up being their passion, both of theirs.
Mm-hmm.
But they had this wide range of choices. And today I see a lot of parents putting all the eggs in one basket. And I know I'm sort of just going off on this, but I feel like if you want the best chance for your child to discover their true passion, expose them to as much as possible and let them try as much as possible. What do you think, Kevin?
I'm with you on that, Jen. This whole idea of exposure and exploration. Allow your child, facilitate the opportunities that you can for exploration. And I love it that you didn't require them to finish everything, didn't require them to become the best, but this is the opportunity just to expose them and see what they love, what they respond to, what they get excited about, what they're really gifted at. I think that is a great way. And so this whole idea of exploration, allowing our children to explore. And I want to be sensitive. Some of us, uh, we have limited financial means by which that can happen. You can't send your kid to every camp, and you can't send your kid, and you don't have to. Just look for ways. I remember some things that happened for me as a teenager that helped me with this. There was a guy in our church that really became a mentor to me. He and his wife both in my teenage years. And I've had the opportunity to thank them for that. But Bill and Mary Beth Milby were their names. Bill was an engineer. And I grew up in a town, Perry, Georgia. He worked in the neighboring town. They lived in Perry, but he worked at Bluebird Body Company in Fort Valley. Bluebird was the company that makes school buses. And he was an engineer. And I thought I wanted to be an engineer. Well, what I really wanted was to be like Bill, because he'd been such a role model to me. And I went to work with Bill one afternoon. And I saw what Bill did, and I'm like, oh, I'm not wired to be an engineer. I don't like science or math that much. But they're just ways you can explore and experiment with that. So as parents, give your children those opportunities however you can. Expose them to things, but then be careful to observe. What is it they get excited about, or what is it that you're dragging them to? And I understand there are times, we were those parents. You must practice. You're studying piano. You must practice, and helping them develop that discipline, because some children won't get that on their own. So there's this balance here, Jen, of just being that helicopter parent, or that laissez-faire parent, and just whatever, but exposing them and then observing what happens.
And then we'll get to the next step, but I would also just caution, this is a big topic that we bring up on Ziglar Family a lot. Realize that they're not going to most likely find their passion and purpose on their handheld devices, on their game, on their iPads. So when you're, when you say, Kevin, something about when they're like, oh, just 5 more minutes, just 10 more minutes, because they're deeply involved in it.
Not a video game.
Technology, right? Then we don't want to encourage that. But okay,
right.
So we've observed and we've exposed them to these many different opportunities. Now, when we start to feel maybe that we're sensing something, what would you suggest is the next step with our kids?
Yeah. And so, Jen, thanks for calling that out, though, about the device. This has been a conversation in our family as recent as this morning. Gwen and I were talking about this, and young children that are just feel that it's now been added to the Bill of Rights of the United States of America that they are entitled to a cell phone and endless hours on that phone every single day. So yes, I'll go off on a sidebar. Put the devices away. I love that Chick-fil-A has adopted this. Put your devices on the table. If you leave them on the table through dinner, we'll give you a free dessert. Because when you're at dinner, be with the people you're with. And so this goes to something else, the next step here. But I want to make sure we come back, and I put a footnote here about expectation. In all of this, let's manage our expectations to make sure that we're not projecting onto our children when we're letting them explore, experiment, our failures, successes, or frustrations. But conversation. Talk to your children about purpose. And I'm not talking about by text.
Yes.
That's how some families communicate nowadays. I used to think just because they're at dinner and they're all on their phones, they're talking to somebody else. No, they could be talking to each other. But put the phones away. Talk to one another. Talk to your children about purpose. And have those talks. And I think it is a whole lot easier to have a series of conversations rather than that big one, we've got to have the conversation about your life purpose. No, I mean, just talk about it regularly. Oh, okay. I'll go off on another tangent here. And I know Ziglar family's big on this. Family dinners. I was in a conversation, was being interviewed for a podcast or something this week, and I was interviewing someone for a podcast, and I had asked my guest how they define success. And then she turned it around and asked me, and I said, well, when our children were at home, a standard of success for me was having family dinner every night, or as many nights as possible. And I took or passed on promotions that would have required me to travel when our children were home, because having dinner every night and then those conversations becoming a natural part rather than that, sit down. Hey, I want to know, what's your life purpose, Sally? Tell me.
No, that doesn't work, does it? No.
No, but just this idea and letting them just, and ask them questions. What gives you joy? If you could do anything, if money wasn't an issue, okay, wow. Now we got to address the money issue.
Okay, let's talk money. You had to go there, right?
Well, I think it's easy for parents. It's easy for me as a parent. I think it's easy for all of us to judge success in life by the metric that our society has deemed the most important metric. How much money will you make? And encouraging our children to pursue the job, the career path, the degree path based on how much money it's going to pay. And research throughout the century shows money is not the measure of success. Above a certain amount of money, which isn't that much, and I don't know what it is now, it's probably 50, 60, maybe up to $60,000. Beyond that, money doesn't bring large degrees of happiness. Once you get your basic needs met, money's somewhat irrelevant in happiness. So just be careful that we're not saying money is the measure of success. Here's something I would also think is really important with our children. Have conversations about what success means to you. Here's how we've defined success in our family. And I love, and I know they're great resources at Ziglar Family, and with Mark, Tim, and Mark and Ann, and what they've done with their children, and the family business meetings, and talking about these values and adopting values. Well, part of that is, what does it mean for you to succeed? And helping our children come to their definition of success, and I believe significance is what we really desire in life. It's not success. Success is a monetary, and significance always involves other people. Oh, Jennifer, that touches on something. We've got to make sure. Well, I want to be careful about got to. I try not to say should, you have to. But I would encourage you to find opportunities in this exploration. Encourage and find opportunities for your children to be involved in serving others. Doing something for someone else, and doing something for someone else that cannot repay them. And just doing something that's a selfless act of service. And let that be part of the enrichment of their life and their journey.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's very important. And for me also, if I would just add in, if you have the opportunity before your children leave home, to let them experience a mission trip. Yes. Even if it's a mission trip to an inner city in the United States, not necessarily to a developing country.
Right.
That had such a profound impact on me personally that I decided my children have to know where they stand in the world by being, where they are in the United States. That's another side note. But Kevin, one thing I wanted to just sort of ask you along these lines. Okay, so we've oriented them, we've observed them, we've had discussions with them. Let's just say for a moment that we're going to use an analogy here. Let's say your child is a pug. You know what a pug dog looks like, right? Physically. Let's say your little pug has decided that they want to run in a race against greyhounds. Okay. You know that that's not going to end well. What do? I'm speaking now, let's put that in real world. They want to be a Major League Baseball player and they strike out every time they're at bat. How do you help them? There is a little element of reality that has to be interjected, or not. Maybe you don't think so. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Okay, now I'm going to have to go for therapy after this, Jennifer, because I was that kid. No, not that kid that had the desires. I was that one of those kids that was always the last chosen. There's still a joke in our family, and my kids love this. When I was young, I grew up in a very blue-collar family, very middle class, or maybe even, a little below middle class standard of living. We had a great life. I never knew we lacked anything because there was so much love. But I thought that I was special because my mom, we would go shopping, and my mom would always ask a question of the store clerk. And if they couldn't answer that question, we left. And I thought it was because I was special. The question was, do you have Huskies? I thought Huskies was a brand. I didn't know Huskies was a size. So I was that chubby kid that was slow, that, that wasn't the superstar athlete, that was always the last chosen. So, yeah, I mean, I can relate to that. Now, not that I ever aspired to be a professional athlete, but I do believe there are things, and maybe it goes back to that conversation and really ask, well, what's the real desire behind that? That would be a question I would encourage parents to ask. What's the real desire? Because I think a lot of that desire is to be significant, to be recognized as standing out. And so here is something I would say. When it comes to gifting and the journey of life, is to recognize that each one of us, and I'm going to use the us here, and I'll also say each one of you and your children is unique. And I interviewed a guy last year, and I loved this one 6-word sentence Tom Winninger wrote, and I wish I had written it. Uniqueness is never identified in comparison. Uniqueness is never identified in comparison.
I like
and
that.
So many times we are comparing ourselves to others. And when a child is wanting that, what they really want is to make their mark on the world. And in our world, who makes the big mark on the world? It's the superstars, it's the celebrities, it's the athletes. Those are the folks that make their mark on the world as we see it. Now, who really makes the mark on the world?
All the people
Teachers.
in the trenches, yes.
Yeah, teachers, nurses, caregivers, folks that are in the caring professions. They're making the world a better place. And they're doing it in very behind the scenes ways. So somehow really digging into what's that real desire, and then help your children find, okay, well, maybe God has not gifted. I mean, I can't dunk a basketball even with the trampoline. I'm 5'7". I'm not dunking a basketball. But what's the desire that I really have there? And what is the unique gift, talent, and ability I have? And how can I go make my mark on the world in the way God designed me?
So would you suggest when they have these ideas that you think are a little bit of a stretch, that we let them maybe try a little bit and then we reflect on it with them? And, like you're saying, what was it that that you were going for, what didn't happen, what could maybe you do differently, what
Yeah.
other avenue could you take, those kinds of questions. But let them try, let them get out there and give it a try.
Well, okay. So one thing that I think I wanted to say earlier and forgot, but there's no one way to do this right. There are ways to do it wrong. There's not one way. So don't feel that there's this one prescribed path. And if you as a parent don't, do this with your children, you've blown it. You're a bad parent. I don't believe that. Um, but you use the word reflection, Jennifer, and I'm glad you did because uh, I believe reflection is really important. And I wish I had learned the power of reflection at a younger age in life. Now, as I say that, I realize there may be a little bit of oxymoron there, that maybe you don't really learn the power of reflection until you get older, and there's a little more to look back on life. But this whole idea of encouraging our children to reflect, and maybe what you just said, what worked well with that? What didn't work well? What did you enjoy most? What was more frustrating than you thought? Those kinds of things. And yes, I'm old school. I mean, I'm sitting here and I realize when I hold up, you may not be able to see it. I use a fountain pen. I'm old school, but I believe there is really power, and this is neuroscience has proven this. I can't point you to the place, but I've read it, seen it. There's really power when you put pen to paper. There's a different experience in writing rather than just typing on a keyboard. And that's not just a difference in generation. There is something about the experience of writing. And so sometimes reflection, encourage, pull out a piece of paper, write something or draw something that leads you to reflect. But I think if we could encourage our children and instill in them the value of reflection, that would help.
I think that's great. My girls love journals. They every time they go to Barnes and Noble and they see a different cute cover, they want a different journal. So getting them something like that also helps with the reflection. And
Yeah.
I think as we're getting to the end of our time together, I want to just sort of bring it together and say, maybe parents are hearing this and thinking that these are conversations to be had with those kids going off to college and the older teenagers. But I would suspect, and I'll let you comment on it, that this starts at the earliest ages when they're starting their earliest explorations of things in an age appropriate way, that you're
Yes.
having these observations, these conversations. And that way, by the time that they are getting ready to launch, this is normal. This is natural.
Yeah.
They feel comfortable having these conversations with you. What do you think?
Oh, spot on, Jen. Spot on. And that's what I was trying to allude to earlier. Don't make it the conversation. Have this whole, that it's a series of conversations. It's just a natural part of what we talk about. And, you know, meal times, bedtimes, special times, date nights with your children, that special one-on-one time. These times, it's just conversing. And I think it is also really important to share our experiences, both our successes and failures in this journey, and what we've learned about purpose. And there's one other part to this that I've got to say before we go, and that is, as a parent, I think one of the great joys we have, and again, there's always this careful, hear what I'm saying, don't hear what I'm not saying, but never stop believing in your children. Never stop. Be their greatest encourager, and be that voice of exhortation in their lives. So what I don't want you to hear is, don't be the one that's telling them, the child that's 5'7", you're going to be the next Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Probably not. That's a dated reference there. I just dated myself.
Okay, I got it.
Yeah. Yeah. But you're not going to be that person. But there is something you can be the best at. And there's something God has wired you. God has gifted you to be the best at something. And I really believe that. And when I say the best, that doesn't mean that you're going to be the best in the world, but it's what you can do better and what you can do best based on your gifts, talents, and abilities, your journey, your experiences, and your perspective. There's something you're uniquely gifted to do. Do that, and that's when you'll find the greatest joy.
Amen. And related to that, at one time I was told when my children were very young, is one thing that's important to help them to be in touch with their own feelings about how they are doing at something, and if they're the best at it and so forth, is we have this tendency to say, I'm proud of you, I'm proud of you, I'm proud of you. Balance that with saying, how does that make you feel? Does that make you feel proud of yourself? I bet you're proud of yourself. And let them reflect inward to see how they feel about that experience, and then discuss that.
Oh, that's good. And proud of the effort more than the outcome
Yes.
necessarily.
Yes.
Yeah, because there's so much where we get on the outcome. You finished first. I think we could all look back at some of those Olympic moments where the person, had some event or accident in the event, and I wasn't able to finish first, but they persevered and finished anyway. And who's the world cheering for? The person that's going through, they may be the dead last to finish, but they persevered through difficulty. And so it's not the result, it's the effort and the involvement that we want to applaud.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, I want to tell our community, our listeners, our viewers today who've joined us, that we are ending our conversation, but I have more from Kevin that I will be sharing with you, because Kevin has given us a downloadable resource that we will be posting for you to download. It's called Questions You Might Find Helpful When Exploring Purpose. So things to think about a little bit as a parent to help you, to help your child explore their purpose, and to kind of give you some ideas of what that looks like when you are living in your purpose. There's a Japanese word for it. It's, what is it, Kevin? Ikigai, I think it's called.
Ikigai. Yeah. And there's the diagram. I hope we share that somewhere. It's the 4 circles, what you love doing, what the world needs, what you're paid for, and what you're great at. And right in the middle, where all of those 4 circles intersect, in that, is that a Venn diagram? Right in the middle is purpose. And it's
yes,
all of that together. Yes.
so we'll make that into a PDF download for them as well, so they can take a look at that, because I think this is just the beginning of a lot of thought-provoking conversations that families can have. You who are listening now are probably going to want to really think this through, think about how purpose has been defined in your life and then in your children's lives. And Kevin, you are just awesome for coming on and sharing this time with us today. Tell everyone, if they like this idea of purpose and they would like to know more, how can they follow you, since purpose is your platform, to sort of fill their tanks even more?
Okay. One thing you can do is the Higher Purpose podcast. This is a weekly series of conversations. And now we're on this focus of pursuing purpose in business. What does that look like? We're interviewing 12 business owners, or probably even more, but at least 12 business owners, talking about how they've pursued purpose in business and what that makes look different for them. So you can do that at higherpurposepodcast.com. Also, my personal website, kevindmonroe.com. All the resources are available there. I'm on Twitter, Kevin_Monroe, Facebook, and LinkedIn. However you connect socially, those are the platforms I use. I would love to connect with you. And Jennifer, there's one thing I got to say. And when you're talking to your children about purpose, guess what? You're going to have some epiphanies about your own purpose and what purpose means for you. So when you're going through some of these questions, you go, oh, wow, some self-discovery about it in your life. And as long as you have a pulse, you have a purpose. So you're not too old. If you're still living, breathing, God has something in store for you.
Amen. Amen. I'm just going to drop the mic on that note right there because that's fantastic, Kevin. We will link to all of your resources in the notes for this broadcast, and we'll make sure our community can access that easily. So once again, thank you, Kevin, for joining us today and sharing your wisdom. Thank you, Ziglar Family Community, for spending your time with us. And we will have more on this topic for you. So stay tuned, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, guys.